My mic's here.
No, my hand mics.
Sweet Caroline. Oh. Do. Okay. Cool. I'll need those. Right, thanks everyone for your patience and welcome back to the event. Firstly, thanks to Claire and Daniel for your presentations before. That was really good to know, even for me, someone who's been doing this for 14 years. And going on to that, a quick intro about myself. Some of you guys may know me, some of you guys probably don't, most likely don't. My name is Charlie Norton. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Vamos Business Transfer, aka the original £1 Charlie, the best business broker in the UK, or Charles to my mother Josie. In my buying career, and selling career, and overall business career, that's expanded for about 14 years now. I've brought many different companies around 2021, all the way from £1, which my advice is don't buy a business for £1 unless you're prepared for the heartbreak and the stress and the turmoil that will come with it, all up to £4 million. And in my selling career, before I was a broker, by the way, sold big companies for £1, which, funny enough, was one I bought for £1. But also plunked in 80 grand of my own monies. Darren and Ray was there for that experience last year, and sold companies for about 3.4 million. And in my brokering career so far, it's only been slightly over a year, hence why I was just talking to Claire about my injury accounts. Sold companies between 700,000 to 3.6 million. We tend to mostly aim between the 1 million to 20 million low mid-market value in businesses. Oh. There we go. So one of the reasons I set up Vamos Business Transfer, because after 14 years buying, selling, scaling businesses, I noticed, and just before I get to saying this, are there any other business brokers in the room? A bit earlier. Okay. In my humble opinion, the big boys in the business broking and advisory space in the UK and Europe aren't really worth as much as they should be, and traditionally they overvalue businesses to list on business owners for sale, and don't sell the businesses possibly a year, 2 years, 3 years, even unfortunately up to 5 years. And I noticed that as a business buyer, I'd see the same business for sale 2 years later, and I used to go, bloody hell. And I used to sell my own businesses without a broker, by myself, simply through networking, other competitors, trade buyers, search funds, family offices, whoever the particular buyer at that point in time may be. So the reason why I set up Vamos, Spanish or Latin for let's go, is to facilitate quick transactions within the business buying and selling space. And on average, our clients from listing to heads of terms is around 81 days. I'm proud to say it's something I keep track of. And who knows, there might be a company that I find that smashes out the park and takes me 6 months, but that's not what we do. And just to go a bit more about the process of Vamos before I get into my presentation about seller's discretionary earnings versus EBITDA, which might bore some of you, you might probably already know this. Vamos in itself has a very straightforward process, and possibly the two other brokers in the room can nick this from me. So the first 30 days, we obviously list the client. We then create awareness, engage with all the possible buyers, either through our private network, through WhatsApp, Facebook and LinkedIn, the traditional public listing sites such as Business Sale, Dalton's Business, RightBiz, and then we also speak to various different high net worth individuals, family offices, search funds, or buy-side brokers, which we also offer that service as well recently. That's the first 30 days. The second 30 days is initially discovery and vetting said buyers. So we'd hope between day 30 to 60, we'd have all the ready buyers at the table. For instance, Claire mentioned a mutual client of ours, and we are in day 40, I believe, from memory. I have to double check that. I did have 2 Johnny Walkers before I started this, so I have to double check that stat. But I believe we're in day 40. I know next week or the week after, when the client is back from holiday, they've got 5 discovery calls, initial discovery calls with various different buyers, 1 being trade, 3 of them are private equity, another is a search fund. Hopefully with a view to eventually buy said client and make them a reasonable offer, obviously. And that's a really key point about Vamos. Just because we're fast and we're all about speed, we do not compromise on enterprise value or total company value. We're very, very precious on how much the business is worth. Which leads me into my presentation as such. So I believe I might have jumped. Did I jump there? Oh, 1 second. Is that better? Can you hear me okay? Better like that? Okay, thank you. Cool. So, in the current business valuation market, it's worth to note that I'm actually accredited business valuer from the ACCA, which I recently got my young cousin Barn, if you want to say hello to him, to do. He's looking to become a business broker in the fullness of time. So I try to back up my 14 years of experience with a qualification, just to give me a bit of credence to the subject. And a lot of people in business valuations will explain that it's more of an art than it is exact science. And you could go through many different business valuations, such as discounted cash flow, net asset value, and my dreaded word that if any of you guys ever mention it to me, EBITDA. And I emphasise the DAR. Which those you guys don't know is earnings before interest, tax, depreciation and amortisation. Now, quite useful for publicly traded companies or mid-market and beyond. I specialise in the lower mid-market and SME space. And in the lower mid-market and SME space, EBITDA, in my opinion, and I'm going to quote Charlie Munger here, should be substitute for bullshit earnings. But commonly across the practice you ask in small businesses, what's your EBITDA? Which I find is a disservice to you and the potential seller, or if you was the seller, the potential buyer. Now, the problem with SME valuations, they're very much different from publicly traded companies. Publicly traded companies' valuations are there for earnings reports, large shareholder dividends, so on and so forth, where SME valuations are there more as, I say, probably a gut check, rather than treat it as gospel, treat it just as a guidance. So just a quick difference in SDE. I'm actually getting a hat that's saying SDE or a top SDE soon, because I want to try and bring that more forth to the UK market. And we need to bring back realistic valuations. But SDE, seller discretionary earnings, used for SME businesses. Add-backs traditionally are director's salary, pension, one-off benefits, and in my instance, when I was running various different companies throughout my life, it might be mum and dad's health insurance, their Audis, basically any benefits the director takes from the business that's not traditional. I.e., as I always say to potential sellers, if I shot you, what does the company actually earn? I need to figure out a nicer way to say that, to be honest with you. And EBITDA, as I previously said, is used for investor-ready companies. So, true earnings challenge, just as I alluded to just before then. Owner salary and perks, and that might even just be, I saw something, and Claire, being a tax expert, can probably clarify this, but there was a HMRC rule that you could actually buy a therapy dog. And it could be your dog, but for the therapy of the business, it could be a tax-deductible expense. Obviously, if you got rid of the owner with their therapy dog, that would be an add-back. Very silly thing to say, but even small add-backs like that all add back to the true cash flow of the business. And the reason why I bang on about sellers' discretionary earnings is simply because it shows a potential buyer their return on investment, what they actually buy in for the value they're giving. And with EBITDA, for instance, depreciation, it's a great tool for save taxes as a business owner. But if I bought a truck, and most of my background is haulage, let's say I bought a truck for £400,000, I adjusted 20% a year for the depreciation, that's around £80,000 that I'm writing off my tax. So EBITDA, in my opinion, isn't a great metric for valuation. So a few more points, and I must admit, I feel like my throat's going a little bit, but if you can just read, can you guys see the presentation okay, even at the back? Yeah. Fantastic. So have a quick read through that, because basically what I've just said in advance, I do rush through sometimes, I do apologise about that. But in my opinion, it does ignore key realities, such as depreciation, certain taxes, and as we can see on top, EBITDA does not equal cash flow. So, more of what I just sort of said, I should have just wrapped this up in one slide, but more of what I just explained about why seller's discretionary earnings matters in small business valuations. Now, the reason why I don't tend to do micro businesses as a business broker is because they and ah about £1,000 in the cash kitty, or if the business money is their money. So I tend to like to, mostly do low mid-market transactions because you have a certain sophistication when it comes to the ownership level, where they understand actually this money in the bank, or the business bank, isn't actually my money, unless I want to create a taxation event and make it my money. And for most of you guys and girls who are experienced in this room, one of the most tax efficient ways to get the money out of the bank is through what we call business asset disposal relief, formerly known as entrepreneurs relief, which unfortunately under this Labour government is going up and up and up. That's a different story for another day, politics, I'm sure. Rather than taking, let's say, dividends out. Oh, I'm going back. Oh. Cool. So sorry, my pronunciation's terrible. I'm from East London, if you can't tell. So risk factors and positive multipliers and discount drivers. So this is when I'm coming to value a business. I tend to ask business owners certain questions so I can assess the actual operations and the nature of the business. And for instance, positive multipliers, and I should have wrote this on the presentation. So every positive multiplier, put a 0.5 multiplier up. Every discount driver, a 0.5 down. And Darren, there are certain brackets of businesses and sizes that actually start at, let's say, 1 times seller's discretionary earnings or 2.5 times seller's discretionary earnings. And I use these different metrics to either push that down or up to come to my final valuation. And it is also worth mentioning, just as a side note, that some businesses, i.e. the whole hotel, an SDE isn't a good way to value a property-based business. You'd actually have to have 2 different types of valuations, such as NAV, the asset value, and then plus potentially SD on top, but that's sort of down for negotiation. In fact, I tend to leave property-based businesses to estate agents, to be quite frank. So, different positive multipliers. Obviously, recurring revenue, that's always a great thing to have within a business. Consistent, and that should actually say contracted trade, not just consistent. When I was a business buyer, I used to buy businesses older than myself. To be honest, that was always a rule of thumb of mine. If it's older than me, it's weathered a lot more than I have. So it must be a good business. And then discount drivers. So it says their owner is the business, but I meant to say key man dependency, as it's also known. So I've been an owner-operator myself when I was a much younger man. And every day, 12 hours a day, I'll be in that office, I'll be in the yard, I'll be out driving, constantly banging on the drum because I thought that's the most urgent thing, i.e. my driver's called in sick, I need to jump in a truck, I need to make 100 sales calls today, and I was constantly the main driver of that business, similar to what I am today with Vamos. But having key man dependency isn't a sellable investment, it's a job, as you might have heard that before. Oh, going the wrong way here, sorry about that. So, not only regarding my opinion on seller's discretionary earnings as a true value metric, especially in the field that I'm sure most of us are buying in, I just wanted to make a little side note on creative deal structuring. Now, one of the reasons why some people know me as the original £1 Charlie is because unfortunately, or fortunately, however you look at it, I've bought businesses for £1, no money down, but as I've got more experience in the game, I bloody hate those terms because, as some of you guys know, no money down is a bit of a fallacy. It actually should be called leverage buyouts or instance management buy-ins if you're an external person coming in, or a management buyout if you're the senior management team buying the ownership out. So I'm not a big lover of the no money down phrase. And also the pound deals, as Darren, the guy with the camera just there, and Ray, the lawyer you're going to hear later, have known me to buy a business for £1, put me in hospital, and make me sell it for £1 after an 80 grand investment 8 weeks later. So sometimes buying it for £1 isn't what it says on the tin, and usually there's a lot more under the bonnet than originally thought. So I tried not to buy a £1 business. The only time I would buy a £1 business is if you're an existing empire ready for it to fold into. So you've got the systems, the people, similar industries, you can cross-sell, vertical integrate that business, and they can work, which I did try to do, but there's more of a story on that. There's a few podcasts there that me explaining it, so if you want to Google me, please do. Case study report, I must admit, ignore this case study report because I didn't actually get time to fill in said case study, but what I will do is mention one of my clients who I know Ray's working with at the moment, and they came to me late February asking for a business valuation. Now, to give some brief info without ruining any contractual relationship I have with them, they are a property service provider. They turn over around £3.4 million a year, with around £1 million, and I hate to say it because I've just battered EBITDA, but £1 million EBITDA. I have to say that because everyone knows EBITDA rather than SCE. But it's £1 million rough EBITDA with a asset value around £900,000. So when they originally came to me, we done the free valuation, which I do. And by the way, I'm not trying to sell you a single thing in this presentation. There's just no filter on my head, unfortunately. So when they came to me evaluation in the Feb, I said to them, the two respective owners, I said, your business is worth 3.4 to 4.3, depending on what deal structure you're willing to receive. 8 weeks after that, they've agreed a deal at 3.6 million. So just a quick case study why I personally believe, because I valued it on EBITDA, the EBITDA, would have been 1.3, the SDE was actually £1 million. So I had to remember that. So that's why I believe SDE is a worthwhile valuation metric. Couple final takeaways, and I've got a great freebie for you guys, and you don't have to give me any details or register anything, but just a couple of key takeaways from this quick presentation. So SDE, in my humble opinion, and I'm sure there's people who disagree with me, SDE is a core metric valuer for sub £5 million deals. They normalise earnings rigorously and use multiples as a guidance, not gospel, because I've had some people, and I'm sure the other brokers in the room will mention this, I've Googled that my industry sells for 8x EBITDA, so my business is now worth £800,000. I hate that. But a lot of people Google stuff and believe whatever they want to believe at the end of the day. And then with deal structures, structure it to balance valuation gaps. So going back to that property maintenance service provider I've recently agreed head to terms with, they wanted the 4.3 because I told them that's the max you'll get. The buyer wanted, I think his original offer was about 2.9. So there was a bit of deal structure. So for instance, they're paying 80% up front on day one and the rest over 5 years. So they bridged the valuation gap through creative deal structuring. Next thing is a freebie. Oh, wrong way again, sorry. We'll go QA in just a second. So a freebie. So fear not, this not lead you to any dodgy websites. It will lead you to a Google Drive that has years of accumulated, I can't say stolen, accumulated things. And one is a deal valuer, a due diligence questionnaire, a due diligence checklist, a non-disclosure agreement. Sorry, Ray. I must admit, it's a little bit old, but I don't actually use these things anymore. And I was because I must admit, I'm sort of back of the fag packet kind of guy nowadays. But these are all the things that I know people would pay tens of thousands of pounds for. And I wanted to give you guys this for free today, just to give you guys as much value as possible. You don't have to sign your name, you don't have to register with myself. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the presentation. We will go to Q&A now.
Thank you very much, Charlie. That's wonderful. Anyone have any questions for Mr. Norton? Here he goes.
Where did you get the DDQ from, Charlie?
It's not yours. It's not a legal DDQ either. It's more of an operational DDQ, just so you're aware, Ray, before you sue me.
Hi. Sellers' earnings. I'm selling that. If I'm buying, I'm not. How do you deal with that in the middle?
That's exactly where I sit, in the middle. So, I've bought and sold companies, and you have to find common ground. And obviously, just for a case study example to hopefully answer your question, and this is an exact case study, but I'm just going to say easy numbers so everyone can get the gist. Let's say we have a business earning around £1 million a year profit, EBITDA, ST, whatever you call it. The owner pays themselves £200,000 a year, and they're an owner-operator in the business. And they're looking to sell the business, and the seller goes, well, my business earns £1 million a year, I pay myself 200 grand out of that. So therefore, it's worth 3 times a million, £3 million. The buyer goes, well, actually, we need to normalise your replacement costs. So let's say a replacement cost for a senior operations director who does their job is around £80,000 a year. So you take away the 80,000 as the replacement cost and work out the value based on that. And that's the buyer's perspective. Obviously the seller's not going to agree to that, but it is a little bit about negotiation, people, expectation management. And if you've got an owner who can't appreciate that simple fact that you're going to have a replacement cost for them, they're probably not the business you want to be doing business with, in my humble opinion. And it is down to negotiation, but it should be glaringly obvious, especially if they know how much effort, time they put into the business, that a new buyer or investor is going to want to replace them with a normalised market salary. And for instance, let's say £80,000. So it is a bit of a toing and froing, a bit of an art, but most people should understand that argument, in my humble opinion. But I have come across sellers who don't. So I appreciate that question as well.
Anyone else?
I'm interested in the valuation process and how fluid it seems to be, whether it's EBITDA or SDE. I'm particularly interested in how to measure brand value personally, but is there any other innovations within industry or of how businesses are valued as a total and what actually sells?
I feel there's 2 questions in there, so I'm just going to answer one and then answer the second, if that's okay, Stevie. So you mentioned brand value. I know you come from a branding background, so I appreciate why you asked that. And I perceive what you're saying, what they usually call goodwill. And for sub £5 million deals, I'm a big believer that goodwill shows in the finances. Because I've had a lot of sellers before in the past saying, the potential, the brand name, the reputation. But in reality, that translates to the actual financials. You can't tell me you've got a £10 million business based on your brand when it only does £2 million in sales. The brand is £2 million in sales. So that's my humble opinion on goodwill at that size. If you're talking about publicly traded company, i.e. Dr. Dre Beats, before Apple bought them out, they brought the goodwill and brand because they knew entering that marketplace and having that audience is a good synergy for them. Or when Facebook brought Instagram, these things do have goodwill and brand value. I'm just a big believer in the mid-market and below businesses space. There's no such thing as goodwill. And people can debate me on that all day. I just think goodwill reflects in the numbers. Now, I must admit, I've just gone off your second point. Can you just say that one, the second point again, if that's all right?
It was a bit of a mix, to be honest.
It was a bit of a mix.
Is there any other innovations that are coming out?
Just going on to I think you asked about different ways to value as part of your second point. So as I mentioned, if it's property-based businesses, hotels, care homes, nurseries which own the freehold and operate out of said freehold, depending on what the deal is going to be, either selling the freehold as a part of the business, then I believe you have to do an asset valuation. And ideally get what they call a RICS valuer, a surveyor, to come in and actually assess the true value of that property and then add on to the valuation either an SDE valuation or even a discounted cash flow, however you want to do it, on top of the valuation. Now the problem is, as a business buyer, if you've got a property value in this, imagine this building's worth 500,000, but the business makes 100,000, so there's a fair argument that it's worth 300,000 on top of the 500,000, making 800,000 in total value.
Probably not.
Now most business buyers are not going to buy a £100,000 generating business for 800,000. So usually what I advise as a buy-side broker as well is that you structure the deal in a way that you buy the business, the limited co, for the value you've decided, let's, just for argument's sake, 300,000, probably a bit less if you're a savvy business buyer. And you buy it as a limited co, but then what you do is get a lease from the existing freeholders, so the current owners, for let's say 10, 20 years, with ideally a purchase option in place. So once you've collected enough monies for a deposit, ready for a commercial mortgage, you can then go back to the original owner and buy said property. That's just my humble opinion though. I'm always happy to be proven wrong.
Yeah, that's cool.
So in property, typically you have risk valuers. Do we have something similar in business? And is it like a regulated thing or?
So one of the reasons why I got into business broking and business valuing, because it is the Wild West. It's an unregulated market. It's usually, I'm sorry to the other two brokers in the room, but it's usually an area filled with ex-car salesmen, ex-estate agents, or people fresh out of uni. No one with actual real running, managing, selling, buying, scaling businesses, however you want to characterise that. So there is no regulation to be a business broker. There are various different awarding bodies, such as the IBBA and the ACCA, that you could go and get more qualifications in the subjects, like me being a qualified business valuer, or the IBBA, which is the National Business Broker Association, which are more American-based, to be honest with you, but in Britain there's no such thing as a regulated business broking profession, hence why the Wild West, hence why there's no industry standards, hence why it's allowed me, being Vamos, to disrupt the industry and try and organise quick, professional deals.
The challenge is, if you see most of the deals online, they will say open for offers.
Yes.
So there's no valuation done, there is no proper research done, and it's up to the buyer to pay to how much they can pay.
Yeah.
And that's how they do valuations.
Yeah. And on one side of the coin of valuations, you've got the traditional big brokers in the market who goes, Mr. Smith, your business makes £100,000 a year. I believe it's worth £500,000. Give me £20,000 today and I'll get it sold. And probably don't sell it for another 3 odd years and probably cause a lot of trouble in the marriage for the business owner. And then on the other end, and no disrespect to the financial professionals here, you do get accountants also doing valuations, and as Claire said, there's a mismatch of good accountants and bad accountants, and I've come across some great accountants I've worked with who have good valuation metrics and really good financial reporting, but also come across accountants that, I'll just give a highlight, it was a HGV training company recently where their accountant, so they made £90,000 a year, and this is before I started excluding very small micro businesses about a year ago, about £90,000 a year. I knew him through my professional background as well. If he's making £90,000 a year, I said, your business is worth about 180 at a push. And his accountants turned around and went, that's rubbish, your business is worth 450,000. So there is a bit of grandeur delusion with valuation, and depends who you speak to. And, you know, let's say, Ray is my trusted lawyer, you can hear from in just a moment. I've done too many deals with probably. But if Ray tells me something that's legally right or wrong, I'm going to believe him because I've trusted him, I know him, I know many people have used him and got great services from him. So he's my go-to on that subject, where some business owners have a go-to accountant they might have used for 30, 20 years, or an uncle who once worked in private banking, therefore he knows everything. You know, so that's why it's a bit of a skewed industry.
Thanks, Charlie. That's very helpful. I was just going to make one observation, and I think you probably have a view on it, that in 2027, they're changing the rules around inheritance tax. But as far as we can see at the moment, the government haven't given any definition on how they're going to value small businesses. So I suspect it's going to be absolute carnage.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I don't want to get into politics too much, but I'm completely against that. Just as a fundamental point of view, I think if you have made your money whilst you're alive and you want to give it to your kids or not, it's your choice. But going forward in terms of how the government are going to value businesses, so, and I believe it's one of the business brokers, I think it's New Broad Street, I can't remember who the managing director was there, but he's also a key witness expert for company disputes, and one of my clients is actually in a high court dispute at the moment where the previous founders who got bought out for 100,000 believe the company's worth £10 million, and the actual company makes a loss of £100,000 and is pretty much, I hate to swear, but on its arse. And in fact, it probably could sell for £1 tomorrow if anyone wants it. So there is a bit of dispute methodology within that, but in terms of the government getting involved with company valuations, they're going to need regulation, they're going to need key expert witnesses, and with inheritance tax part, obviously you'd probably sell it to your children for a discounted rate, but who's to say that isn't right or wrong, you know? And you might do a really creative deal structure, and I'm a bit of a business nerd, so I'm going to tell you some really nerdy examples of that. And for you guys who might have heard of, depending on your age, WWF or WWE, the World Wrestling Federation or Entertainment, depending on, you know, yeah, the good stuff. So Vince McMahon Jr., the previous CEO, who we all have seen for the last 30 years, brought it from his father, Vince McMahon Sr., and that was around the 1970s, before the World Wrestling Federation was a multi-global organisation worth about $3 billion. He bought it from his father, from memory, for about $1 million in the 70s. And the deal was that you pay 10% today and the rest over 9 years. And Vince McMahon Sr. said to him, to Junior, if you don't make the payments, I'm going to take it back. Which, to be fair, in hindsight, what a great deal for Junior, because he made it a £1 billion corporation, had his own troubles, don't get me wrong. But for Senior, I think that's a very fair deal, because it was a regional organisation, not making a profit, and, you know, it's a good creative deal structure. So it's hard to answer your question to be precise, because it is more of an art than a science, and hopefully the government is agreeing on that it is more of an art than a science. And if you want to, and as Daniel highlighted earlier in his presentation, many people exit their business for different reasons. When I exited my group of companies last year, it was for health reasons. I wanted to have a different lease of life. I didn't want to work 12 hours a day, and I just wanted to change direction. I've had other previous sellers who sell for retirement, medical reasons, relocation reasons. To be honest, I'm trying to relocate as we speak. But many people sell for different reasons. And it might be my son or daughter who's been, let's say I own a surveying company, and she's recently got a degree in surveying, and she's a bright young spark with all these fresh ideas how to market and acquire customers. I might want to give it to her. You know, I might want to actually, and that's not for her benefit, it might be for the business's benefit. I'm too much of a dinosaur in this aspect. She's great with all this, she's better than me. So that might be the reason why he said it. So it's more of an art than a science. I hope the government don't get involved as much as they do everything else in our lives, but who knows?
That's it. All
Cool.
good. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, appreciate it.
Fernando. Awesome, bud.